Welcome to the Body, Soul, Spirit podcast. This week, I want to dive in when we talk about this topic of identity. I also want to talk about this week about comparison. And I want you to keep in mind while you're listening to this podcast, who you compare yourself to or with. And I want you to start to notice when maybe perhaps for you, it's social media, you're scrolling and you start to notice yourself starting to compare yourself with other people. I want to talk today about the psychology about comparison and that quiet voice that is sometimes so nagging, because comparison never really shouts. It actually just creeps in without us realizing it. It sometimes can go in our subconscious. Sometimes it could be a silent, a quiet voice, maybe from a friend that is or appears like they have it all together. And here you are, and you feel like you're falling behind, or you're not enough, or you look at other people's life and you wonder, why not me? But that is really the voice of comparison. And I want you to notice something about comparison. One of the takeaways, if you can remember something today about comparison, is that sometimes comparison is not necessarily something called envy inside of your heart. Comparison is really a longing. It's a longing that you have to also be seen, to also be valued, to also feel secure in your own story. So when you look at the psychological standpoint of comparison is actually wired into us. Researchers call this the social comparison theory. And so our brains are actually designed to measure, to collaborate, to calibrate, to look at others, and we see ourselves from a certain standard. So our brains are wired that way. It's how we try to find a sense of belonging, how we collaborate with others, how we can go into a group and start to feel safe. And that's why we can go into a gym class or church or a career, a job, some kind of environment with friends. And your brain actually constantly, or instantly, I should say, scans. You want to fit in. That's your brain. You were wired that way to feel a sense of safety. And so when you walk into a room, your brain's asking, am I safe? Do I fit in? What's normal here? And so we have this human nature to want to have this sense of belonging. And that's not vanity. That's actually biology. So comparison is really your nervous system's way of orienting you. It's called social calibration. It's our attempt to find some kind of connection, some kind of security among other people. And so when you think of comparison, I want you to think of it not as something morally, some kind of failure, or you're just an envious person and you have a terrible heart. No, it's your human instinct. And when this issue of comparison starts to rise in you, we can interpret it in a wrong way. And that's where insecurity begins to rise. So it can actually be disruptive and destructive if you don't know how to calibrate it correctly. It could lead you to condemnation. It could lead you to all kinds of feelings, shame perhaps. So I want you to think of comparison in two directions. Comparison can either take you up, or comparison can take you down. And so psychologists describe two major directions when it comes to comparison. You're either going to go up or you're going to go down. Now, when you go up and this sense of comparison, you walk into a room and you want to feel belonged, right? You want to feel a sense of longing. You want to feel a sense of security and safety, and you want to feel like you're a part. That's not bad. When comparison, that's your brain calibrating. That's your brain trying to gauge, trying to set a standard. Do I fit in here? Do I feel safe? Now, we do need to talk about shame at some point in our podcast because oftentimes it could trigger, when shame is at the heart, it could start to trigger all kinds of negative things and beliefs about you. But let's stick to comparison today. So when it takes you up, what does that look like? If I walk into a room and I notice that somebody is doing better, let's say they've achieved or done something that maybe I aspire to do. You see, when you look at somebody and you perceive they're ahead of me, so this can actually, when you're healthy inside, this comparison of going up can actually inspire you to grow. It can inspire you to do something about it. Let's say you walk into a room and you start to feel this sense of low self-esteem, or you start to compare yourself with somebody else because maybe they've lost the weight that you wanted to lose. Well, when you are going upward in comparison, remember, your brain's wired this way. It can actually inspire you and it could take you upward. What did you do? So it starts to awaken this sense of learning. It starts to awaken this healthy upward comparison where you now are inspired and aspire to grow. It doesn't deflate you. It doesn't make you feel less than. You see, unhealthy upward comparison, all it does is it breeds shame and discouragement. So whenever you're trying to move up in comparison, but then you start to compare yourself and it's unhealthy and you start to go downward, you start to feel bad about yourself, that breeds shame and discouragement. And what I want you to see when it comes to comparison is not from a shame base, not from a discouragement, but I want you to look at comparison by this perspective, this belief that it could actually take you upward, that it could inspire you, that you could say, I wonder what they did because I too want to do X, Y, and Z. I wonder what steps they took. I think I'll ask them. And so that doesn't deflate you. That doesn't take you downward. When there is a healthy upward comparison, it actually awakens this admiration. You start to admire, you start to learn, you start to move upward, you start to become perhaps encouraged, and it just gives you this sense and this feeling of inspiration, and you want to do it too, and you want to take the steps necessary, one decision at a time. But when comparison starts to go downward, because it's two ways, then you're going to look to someone who seems to have less or struggle more. When it's taking you downward, you want to put people down. When it's taking you downward, you always look for people and you're like, yeah, but they don't have as much as I do. So you're looking for people who struggle. You're looking for people who have less. Why? Well, that's breeding shame because it's making you feel better. This can create a lot of just unhealthy patterns. It can lead to pride. It can lead to an emotional distance in people's lives. So it's not the comparison itself that's the problem. It's the fruit that it bears inside of your soul. When you go downward in comparison, okay, I want you to look at that. When you go downward in comparison, instead of looking at somebody from pride and emotional distance, it could actually lead you as you go downward in comparison and you start to compare yourself and you go, wow, I'm doing a little bit better than other people. That could create gratitude. It could create a sense of gratitude in your heart. That's healthy. You can be empathetic and just say, wow, I've been there before. How can I help them? And so going downward in comparison, as we start to see other people that are doing worse than us, they're doing less than us, it shouldn't take us to pride and emotional distance. It should actually take us to gratitude and empathy. When you are going upward in comparison, meaning you're looking up at somebody's ahead of you, that can actually inspire you to grow. But when you are looking up at somebody and instead of it going upward, something that's unhealthy going upward in comparison is only going to breed shame and discouragement. So whether you go up in comparison and you're looking at somebody else who's doing better, or you're looking down in comparison and you're watching how other people are doing worse than you, it should lead us to something healthy. It's not the comparison itself that's the problem, because your brain calibrates that way. It wants to feel a sense of belonging, but it's really the fruit that you're bearing inside of your soul. Is it leading you to humility? Is it leading you to gratitude and compassion? Or does it lead you to resentment and superiority and despair and anger? You see, comparison is a signal. Comparison is not a sin, but it's really a messenger of your soul. And when it hurts, it's not saying you're bad for comparing you or comparing yourself to others. It's really saying something inside of you is really longing to grow. Maybe you feel drawn to somebody's creativity, or maybe you're drawn to somebody's calm, or maybe you're drawn to somebody's spiritual depth that they carry. I want you to just think about that for a moment. What if really God is using that feeling and that sense of belonging and longing? What if God is using it to set a spark inside of you? What if it's God saying, and when you look at comparison going upward and you're admiring somebody, or you feel like somebody else is ahead of you, rather than looking at that from an unhealthy way, what if the fruit that you bear is more in terms of, wow, think of it as a flower. I love flowers. Some flowers, when somebody gifts me flowers or I buy flowers, there are flowers that are still closed. They haven't bloomed yet. What if instead of you looking at those that have already gotten ahead of you, instead of looking at them from the context of whether it's spiritual or in career, you could look at it in terms of, I haven't quite bloomed yet. They have, but I haven't yet. I wonder what God is trying to form in you through those feelings that you feel. When you walk in a room and you don't feel like you're a part. I wonder what God is inspiring or aspiring you to do. So when you think about this transformation of comparison, I want you to think of it in terms of a cue, a messenger of your soul. Comparison really becomes toxic when it isolates you from yourself, from others, from God, but it can become very transformative when it moves you toward connection. Healthy comparison leads to inspiration. If she can grow, I can grow. If he can grow, I can grow. Healthy comparison should lead you to gratitude. I'm so thankful for where I am. Healthy comparison should lead you to empathy. I see her humanity and mine too. When comparison bears those kinds of fruits, it doesn't divide you anymore. It refines you. Perhaps some of this comparison has been dividing you instead of refining you. When I look at unhealthy comparison, it's leading you to shame. It's leading you to a sense of discouragement, feeling bad about yourself. Take a moment and picture the person that you compare yourself to. I want you to notice what rises from that. I want you to imagine thinking about that part of you. Why does it feel like that? What is it about that comparison? Because comparison is just a signal, and it's pointing you back to your source, which is God, so that you can have a deeper self-awareness, so that you could start to form those areas in your life. They should inspire you to grow. The goal is not to eliminate comparison altogether, but I want you to start to interpret it wisely. Remember, healthy comparison leads to gratitude, empathy, and inspiration. I want you to anchor your sense of self-worth in God and not horizontal with others. And I want you to just trust that your time of blooming will come too. Comparison is really, it has a way of sneaking in quietly, but it's also a way of bringing you to a sense of belonging, no longer comparing yourself to other people, but really just aspiring you to just wait for your time to bloom, and also to look with admiration when you look at it from an upward place, and to go, I too can do that. I wonder what they did, and I wonder what I need to do so that I too can grow, so that I too can do whatever it is that you're aspiring to do. This week, I want you to notice the voice and the whisper of comparison. And let's go to our source. Our source is God. He gives us a sense of belonging. He doesn't have favorites. He's not comparing you to anybody. You have been fearfully and wonderfully made.